My name is Rebecca Langston, I'm 35, and I've been married to Caleb Langston for almost a decade. 9 years and 4 months to be exact. No kids. Not for lack of trying, but we'll get to that much later. Right now, what matters is the goddamn receipt. It was one of those quiet suburban Tuesday evenings. You know the type. Leftover lasagna, half-drunk wine, the hum of the dishwasher trying harder than both of us in this marriage. Caleb was home early, flipping through channels like he was looking for a version of his life he didn't hate. I was in the bedroom folding laundry, my own version of therapy. Whites, darks, delicates. And then the lingerie, the new lingerie burgundy lace soft mesh, a set that made me feel like someone whose body still meant something. I didn't even buy it to wear for him. It wasn't a seduction tactic. It was for me. Something had cracked open inside me a few weeks earlier. Something small, subtle, like a whisper from a version of myself I hadn't seen in years. She said, "You are not dead." But I guess that whisper turned into a scream when Caleb walked in holding the receipt like it was a police report. $92 at La Rouge? His voice was flat, cold, but not calm, like the first second after a car accident before the pain hits. Who's it for? I didn't understand at first. I blinked, still holding a pair of his socks. I bought it. For who, Rebecca? That was the moment. Not the lingerie. Not the receipt. That question. For me, Caleb. He let out this sharp, bitter laugh, like he had caught me in a lie I hadn't finished telling. Cut the shit. You don't buy lingerie for yourself. I do now. The silence after that stretched long. Elastic. Sharp. He stared at me like I had grown a second head, and I realized right then that in his eyes I had become someone new. Or maybe just someone he couldn't recognize anymore. He didn't throw the receipt. He placed it on my nightstand like it was a weapon. Then he left the room. He slept on the couch that night. And the next. And the next. That should have been the worst of it, right? But it wasn't. It was just the beginning. The next morning I found my bathroom cabinet open. My pills scattered. Toothbrush moved. Like he was looking for evidence. Like my body was a crime scene. My phone? Face down on the kitchen counter, moved 3 inches to the left. He never used to touch it. Now I could feel his fingerprints on the screen. He stopped talking to me. I don't mean silent treatment. I mean every word became suspicious. Where are you going? Who's texting you? Why are you home late? Once I walked out to grab the mail barefoot and came back to find him scrolling through my Gmail. I hadn't cheated. Not then. But Caleb's paranoia didn't need facts. He had decided. And honestly, something inside me started to break free. Let me rewind. Let me tell you about Caleb. He wasn't a monster. That's what people will say. He was a good guy. Quiet. Reliable. And that's all true. He paid the bills. Built the shelves. Showed up to holidays with a bottle of wine and a polite smile. People liked him because he was predictable. But behind closed doors, Caleb didn't like things he couldn't control. He never told me not to wear makeup. He just said things like, "I love your face without all that junk." He didn't forbid high heels, he just complained about the sound they made. He didn't ban lingerie, he just joked, "What are you trying to sell?" And I laughed along back then. I thought it was love. I thought it meant he saw me as more than my appearance. I thought it was safe. It wasn't safe. It was small. Caleb made me small. Over years. Quietly. Slowly. Until I stopped noticing how tightly I was coiled. The first time I wore the lingerie, it wasn't for anyone else. I was alone. Home early from work. The windows were closed. I poured a glass of Malbec, lit a candle, put on the lace, and stood in front of the mirror. Not to admire. Not to pose. Just to see. And I swear to God, I looked at my own reflection like I was meeting a stranger. Someone bold. Someone who didn't shrink under someone else's comfort. I felt taller. Not prettier. Not sexier. Just present. And then Caleb found the receipt, and that version of me became a threat. 3 weeks after that night, I started walking to work. It was only 15 minutes. Caleb used to drive me. Now he left before I even got up. Those walks became my ritual. Headphones in. Music loud. The city waking up around me. I bought a new pair of boots. Black. Sharp. They clicked on the sidewalk like a metronome counting down to something. People started noticing me. A barista smiled. A guy at the crosswalk said, "Nice jacket." Nothing happened. I didn't respond. But I felt it. The current. The attention. The idea that I could be seen. Not as a wife. Not as a possession. But as a woman. Caleb noticed too. His questions got sharper. You wore that to the office? Since when do you wear perfume? You trying to impress someone? And I stopped answering. Not because I was hiding something, but because I didn't owe him my obedience anymore. And then one night Caleb came home late. Drunk. Unusual for him. He stood in the bedroom doorway staring at me while I took off my earrings. You disgust me, he said. I looked at him. Really looked. Wrinkled khakis. Red cheeks. Eyes dull with something deeper than booze. You want attention so bad, he slurred. Go get it. Go be a slut. See how far that gets you. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just stared at him. Then I turned away, unzipped my dress, and walked into the bathroom. I locked the door behind me, showered, and stood under the water until it went cold. That was the night I decided. If he was going to accuse me of cheating, if he was going to destroy the version of me he claimed to love, then he could live with the consequences. I would become what he feared. But on my terms. You don't wake up the morning after a moment like that and feel changed. You make coffee. Feed the dog. Check your email. The performance of normal continues because that's how you survive a marriage built on quiet suffocation. You wear its weight like routine. But something had changed. Caleb didn't apologize for what he said. Of course he didn't. In his mind it was justified. In his mind I was cheating. Even if he couldn't prove it, even if the only thing he had to go on was a bra and his own unease. His conviction was ironclad. There was no trial. Only sentencing. So I stopped playing innocent. I stopped defending myself. And that silence between us, that bitter humming space became fertile. For thought. For possibility. For a version of me that no longer asked permission to breathe. It started innocently enough in an elevator. 3 weeks later, my firm sent me to a legal symposium in downtown Chicago. I stayed at the Arista. One of those slick towers with glass walls and espresso bars that made you feel like your suit mattered more than your soul. 2 nights. Panels. Networking. A bunch of men who talked too long about things that weren't interesting. And then there was Theo. He was one of the speakers. Late 30s, maybe 40. Confident, sharp, the kind of man who knew his presence entered a room 3 seconds before he did. He was too smooth. Too clean. The kind of man I would have dismissed a year ago. But now? Now I noticed him noticing me. He sat across from me during a roundtable session. Commented on something I said. Smiled like it meant something. And I smiled back. That night, I went to the hotel bar, alone, under the lie of grabbing a nightcap. I sat with a glass of rye and the glow of my phone, reading news I didn't care about, feeling the heat of eyes on me from across the room. He approached like it was inevitable. Rebecca, right? His voice was low. Casual. Like we'd done this before. Right, I said. Theo. Mind if I join you? I should have said no. But I didn't. We talked about nothing bourbon airports which panels were bullshit. He asked if I was married. I said, yes. He nodded, didn't press. But I didn't say happily. I didn't say my husband. There was a moment where our legs brushed beneath the table. A flicker of contact. I didn't move away. Neither did he. And then the quiet came. Not awkward. Not forced. Just loaded. Like the air before a thunderclap. Do you want to come upstairs? He asked plainly. Not a smirk. Not a leer. Just a keycard and a question. I thought about Caleb. I thought about the way he looked at me last month. Like I was contaminated. I thought about every cold night. Every breath held. Every time I'd watched myself wither in a marriage that mistook possession for love. And I said, yes. We took the elevator in silence. I watched my reflection in the chrome panel. A woman in heels. Burgundy lips. Lace beneath her blouse. She looked calm. Not nervous. Not scared. Just ready. His room was sleek. Gray. Forgettable. But what happened inside it wasn't. He didn't undress me, I did. Slowly. Deliberately. I didn't want to be taken. I wanted to be present. I wanted to remember everything. His hands were warm. Gentle. No rush. No ownership. Just heat. Just hunger. And when he kissed me, when he moved over me, I didn't feel married. I didn't feel wicked. I didn't feel owned. I felt alive. After I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I didn't lie awake wondering what I'd done. I slept beside him for 3 hours. Not touching. Then I slipped out before sunrise, like I'd only borrowed that version of myself for the night. I didn't look back. At home, Caleb was still asleep when I walked through the door Sunday morning. The house smelled like coffee. The mail was stacked on the counter. Our life still perfectly in place. He didn't ask where I'd been. He'd already decided I was guilty. But now, for the first time, he was right. That should have been the climax. The cheating. The moment the story flips. But it wasn't. It was only activation. Because after that, I realized something terrifying and exhilarating. He was wrong about everything except this. He thought my body wasn't mine. He thought control was love. He thought his rules kept me loyal. But the moment I stepped outside his narrative, I saw it for what it was, a performance of possession masquerading as protection. And now that I had tasted something else, power, pleasure, presence, there was no going back. I didn't tell Caleb, and I wasn't afraid of being caught. Because now I wasn't hiding. I was watching, calculating, planning, becoming. You'd think sleeping with another man would make me feel like I crossed some irreversible line. But the truth is, I crossed it long before I opened the hotel door. Caleb didn't notice. Or maybe he did, just not in the way that mattered. He stopped asking questions. No more accusations. No more passive-aggressive comments. He just went quiet. Not cold, not violent, blank. Like he had handed the keys of our marriage to gravity and let it slide downhill on its own. We became polite strangers. I cooked. He ate. He took out the trash. I folded his shirts. We watched separate shows in separate rooms. And honestly, I preferred it that way. The tension was gone. That gnawing pressure of trying to prove I was loyal. Explain I wasn't cheating. Justify why I shaved my legs or wore lipstick or bought a goddamn bra. Now, silence. Space. And for the first time in years, privacy inside my own body. I started going out more. Late evenings with Lena. Gallery nights. A jazz lounge downtown where no one knew my last name. Sometimes I went alone. Sometimes I met people. Not always men. Not always for sex. But always to remind myself. I exist. Caleb noticed the perfume. The change in posture. The absences. But he never said a word. I think he thought ignoring it would make it disappear. Instead, it made it bloom. One night he finally cracked. It was a Friday. I came home past midnight, heels in hand, mascara smudged, hair still smelling like sandalwood cologne that wasn't his. I was sober, calm, ready for sleep. He was waiting in the kitchen. "You look different," he said, arms crossed, leaning against the fridge. I didn't answer. He looked me up and down. "You seeing someone?" The old me would have stumbled, panicked, sworn up and down that I wasn't. Offered receipts, maps, timestamps, guilt, apologies. Instead I said, "Does it matter?" His jaw flexed. He wasn't expecting that. "Jesus, Rebecca. No, seriously. Does it matter?" He didn't speak. "Because you already decided I was cheating months ago, before I ever did. You punished me. Shamed me. Looked at me like I was dirty. And now that I've finally stopped apologizing for breathing in my own skin, now you want answers?" Silence. I took a sip from the glass I'd left in the sink that morning. Warm water. Still tasted like freedom. "I'm not hiding, Caleb. I'm not pretending. You wanted the truth. Here it is. I don't owe you a performance anymore." He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just sat down at the kitchen table. And for the first time since I met him, I saw something break behind his eyes. But I didn't comfort him. Because I was done shrinking just to keep his insecurities intact. After that night, something in Caleb withered. He didn't confront me again. He didn't try to stop me from going out. If anything, he retreated, into work, into his phone, into video games and long showers and half-hearted chores. The man who once hovered like a jealous warden now moved around the house like a ghost. I almost pitied him. Almost. But then I'd remember the years I lost. The slow erosion of autonomy, the casual shaming, the silent judgments dressed up as concern. The way he taught me to fear my own reflection. And I realized, this was never about me cheating. It was about control. And now that he'd lost it, there was nothing left of him but his own collapse. I didn't ask for a divorce. Not yet. Why? Because for once in this marriage I was the one holding the leash. He didn't know what I was doing or who I was with. But he knew something had shifted. He felt it in the way I looked past him at dinner. In the silk of my shirts. In the scent of vetiver and rose on my skin. In the way I no longer flinched when he touched my arm. Because now I didn't need his affection. And he hated it. He hated that I could walk into a room and not orbit around him. He hated that I could smile without him being the reason. I started documenting everything. Not for protection, for clarity. The dates. The names. The feelings. What I wore. What I wanted. I wrote it all down in a leather-bound journal he would never touch. Not because I feared guilt, but because I wanted to remember. For so long I had lived in a fog of obligation. Now I was documenting my return to life. Page by page. Not for therapy. Not for forgiveness. Just for me. At work they noticed. Promotions. Praise. I led meetings without second-guessing myself. I made decisions without checking in with anyone. I wore red lipstick to a Monday morning conference call, and didn't care if it looked professional. My boss pulled me aside. "You've changed," he said. "You're sharper. More decisive." "Is that a problem?" "No," he grinned. "It's electric." That weekend I met someone new. Not at a bar. Not online. At a bookstore. Elias. Early 40s. Quiet. Silver in his beard. He noticed the book I was holding, poetry of all things. We talked for 20 minutes, standing in the travel aisle. No flirting. Just connection. He didn't ask for my number. He just said, "If I see you here again, I'll take it as fate." I saw him again the next Saturday. And this time, I handed him my number before he could ask. Not because I was desperate. Because I wanted to. Because I could. I never told Caleb about Elias. Or the man before him. Or the woman I kissed at the gallery 2 weeks ago. Not because I'm ashamed. But because he doesn't deserve my truth anymore. He surrendered that right when he made his love conditional. Sometimes I wonder if Caleb tells his friends what's happening. If he paints himself as the victim, the husband whose wife changed overnight, who started going out late, who lost interest in the marriage. I'm sure he does. And I'm sure they nod and clink beers and mutter things like, "Women, man." But he'll never tell them about the receipt. The night he accused me of cheating because I dared to put lace on my skin. The slow years of suffocation. The shame he mistook for loyalty. He'll never admit that his fear created the very woman he lost. I didn't become unfaithful because I was bored. I became unfaithful because I finally stopped being obedient. And I'll never go back. There was no screaming. No broken plates. No slammed doors. Just mornings. Mornings where Caleb would pass by me in the hallway like a stranger. Mornings where I'd hum while I did my hair. Music playing low on the bathroom counter. Mornings where we lived in the same house but entirely different realities. I never expected him to fight for me. I just expected him to fight. But instead he retreated. And I realized he didn't love me. He loved owning me. It's strange how fast your body adjusts to freedom. Like muscles remembering what it's like not to brace for criticism. I started sleeping naked again. Not for seduction, for comfort. I'd forgotten what cotton sheets against bare skin felt like without shame. Caleb didn't say a word. He stopped looking at me altogether. As if I disgusted him, or worse, as if I reminded him of something he could no longer control. And I let him drift. I didn't comfort him. I didn't coax him back. I watched him from the other side of the marriage, and I did something I hadn't done in years. I thrived. Elias and I didn't rush into anything. We met on Saturdays, no pressure, no rules. Coffee at the bookstore. Walks that turned into dinners. A trip to a hidden jazz lounge behind a florist shop where the walls were painted black, and no one asked questions. He never asked about my marriage. I never lied. He kissed me like time didn't exist, slow, deliberate, hands never moving too fast, never asking for more than I offered. And maybe that's why I wanted him more. Because he didn't want to take. He wanted to meet. And I hadn't met anyone in years. Not even myself. At home Caleb started unraveling. Not visibly. Not loudly. But in that pathetic, private way men unravel when their illusions start to rot. He started working later. He stopped shaving. He stayed up scrolling endlessly through his phone, blank-eyed, mouth slightly open. Like if he just kept swiping, the version of his life he lost might come back. He asked once, only once, in the middle of dinner, "Why are you doing this?" I looked at him for a long time before answering. Doing what? This. All of this. And I wanted to laugh. Because I hadn't done anything he hadn't already accused me of months ago. "I'm just living, Caleb," I said calmly. "You should try it." He didn't respond. Just chewed slower. And kept chewing long after the flavor had gone. There was a time when I would have felt guilt. When I would have tried to save the marriage. But guilt is a leash. One I'd worn long enough. I wasn't destroying anything. He was. With every silent accusation. With every cold shoulder. With every moment he chose control over connection. I simply stopped standing in the rubble pretending it was a home. The tipping point came in June. A long weekend. Holiday traffic. Neighbors throwing BBQs. And Caleb, out of nowhere, asked if I wanted to go away together. I blinked. What? Just for a weekend. Clear the air. There was no sincerity in his voice. No spark. Just panic. As if he thought a change of scenery could reset the board. As if dragging me to a cabin would reboot the version of me he lost. I stared at him for a long time before answering. No. He swallowed. Hard. You don't even want to try? I did try, Caleb. For years. When I stopped wearing lipstick, when I stopped initiating sex, when I stopped talking about how lonely I was. That was me trying. Quietly. Every day. I stood and cleared the table. Calmly. You noticed the lingerie. But you never noticed the years before it when I stopped being a person. That night, he slept in the guest room. He hasn't left it since. Elias still doesn't ask questions. He doesn't need to. I come to him with the answers I want to share. And he accepts them like gifts, not weapons. He once said, "You carry your silence like armor." I smiled. Because it is. He never tried to remove it. He simply stood beside it. One night he traced my spine with his fingers and said, "You don't owe anyone a version of yourself that keeps you small." And I felt it. Deep in the bones that had been bending for too long. The next morning I started writing again. Not just notes. Pages. Thoughts I never said aloud. Memories I'd buried under years of survival. Letters to the woman I used to be. And to the one I was becoming. I wrote about the hallway light that used to stay on. The calendar of fertility treatments that ended in silence. The years of sexless nights and the emptiness that came when your husband touches you like a duty. I wrote about the moment I stopped asking for permission to exist. And I didn't cry once. Sometimes I catch Caleb watching me, quietly from the doorway like a man staring at a house that used to be his but now holds no key. And I don't feel anger. I don't feel pity. I feel distance. He is a photograph left in the sun too long. Familiar. But faded. And no longer mine. At work I was offered a new role. A project lead for a long-term case in another city. High visibility. High autonomy. 2-year relocation. I haven't told Caleb yet. Because I already know the answer. The old me would have worried. Would have begged him to understand. Would have tried to twist myself into a version of me that could still be his wife. The new me? She's already booking the flight. I don't feel like a villain. I don't feel like a cheater. I feel like a woman who finally stepped out of a cage she didn't realize was locked. Caleb was the one who closed the door. He just never expected I'd learn how to walk through walls. The day I told Caleb I was leaving, he didn't say anything at first. Not why. Not please. Not even okay. He just blinked. Like a man who's been sitting in the dark for so long that the light hurts. It was a Thursday morning. Overcast sky. Coffee brewing. I was wearing a slate gray sweater I bought with Elias. Not flashy, just soft and clean and new. The smell of rain hovered outside the open window. He was sitting at the table scrolling his phone like always. A man buried under his own routine. I stood across from him. "Caleb, I've accepted a position in Denver." He looked up. Slowly. "What?" "It's 2 years. Maybe more. I start next month." He frowned. "What the hell are you talking about?" "I'm moving. Alone." That's when it hit him. Not as words, but as finality. That I wasn't bluffing. That I wasn't waiting for a fight. That the game was over, and I had walked off the board. He opened his mouth, closed it again. His throat moved like he was swallowing glass. "You're just leaving?" "Yes." Just like that. I looked him in the eye. "No, Caleb. Not just like that. This began a long time ago. You just never noticed." He followed me around the house after that, like a man chasing smoke. "So what, this is about the lingerie? That's it? I made one mistake and now you're blowing up our life?" And I actually laughed. Not cruelly. Not bitterly. Just stunned. That after everything, that's what he thought. "You didn't make one mistake," I said. "You built a life where I couldn't breathe. And when I finally took one full breath, you accused me of betrayal." He flinched. A visible crack in the performance. "You should have talked to me." "I did," I said softly. You just never listened. The following weeks were silent warfare. He didn't stop me. He didn't beg. But I saw it. The way he hovered near the door when I packed a box. The way he lingered near my phone like he still hoped to catch a name he could weaponize. Once he asked, "Is there someone else?" And I paused, not to lie, but to choose which truth he deserved. So I said, "There's someone I can be around without vanishing." That was all. He didn't ask again. I didn't move out in a storm. No late-night escape. No screaming match. I left in daylight. Clean. Organized. Paid the movers. Changed my address. Left him the house, the couch, the keys, and the life he'd carved around my silence. Elias offered to fly out, help me settle. I told him no. Not because I didn't want him, but because I needed to walk into the next chapter by myself. This wasn't about romance. It wasn't about revenge. It was about returning to my body, my name, myself. The day I flew out, I left a note on the kitchen table. No emotion. No flourish. Just one line. Dead things don't burn. But I do. Denver was cold that first week. My apartment was small. Minimal. Mine. No shared dresser. No second toothbrush. No eyes watching what I wore, where I went, how I smiled. Just me. I ate late. Took long showers. Slept sprawled across the whole bed. Lingered in front of mirrors without shame or apology. I burned every piece of clothing I had worn for his comfort. Not literally, but close. I donated the beige sweaters, the practical shoes, the thick jeans that erased my shape. I bought satin robes and silk camisoles, not to be looked at, but to feel texture against skin. To remember that I had skin. I didn't block Caleb. I didn't erase him. He messaged once, a single line weeks later. "Are you happy?" I stared at it. No anger. No sadness. Just stillness. Then I typed, "I'm real." And that was the last time we spoke. People ask me now sometimes if I regret it. The affair. The departure. The fire I lit under my old life. And I tell them the truth. No. Because cheating isn't always about sex. Sometimes it's about survival. About breaking a contract you never signed. I cheated on the idea of the woman he thought I should be. And I would do it again. With clarity. With precision. With fire. In the end, Caleb didn't lose me because I cheated. He lost me because he confused silence for loyalty. He thought obedience meant love. He thought shame would keep me small. But shame is a short rope. And I outgrew it. They say there's no such thing as a clean break. That endings are messy. Ugly. Loud. But mine wasn't. It was quiet. Clean. Surgical. Like a scalpel sliding through tissue that had already died. I told him on a Thursday. The sky was colorless. The kind of morning that feels like it forgot to wake up. Caleb sat at the table in the same seat he always sat in, scrolling through his phone, drinking the same burnt coffee he made every morning. He hadn't shaved in a week. His hoodie was stained. The man who once critiqued every choice I made now barely noticed his own. I stood in the doorway and said it directly. "I'm leaving." He looked up slowly, confused, not shocked. "Leaving where?" "Denver." His brows pulled in. "Denver? What the hell is in Denver?" Me. I had accepted the job 2 weeks earlier. Project director. 2 years minimum. High-level litigation. Full autonomy. New city. New nameplate. New air. Caleb blinked like the words didn't make sense in his mouth. "You didn't tell me you applied." "I didn't need to." "Of course you did." "You're my," he stopped. I raised an eyebrow. "Go ahead. Say it." He looked away. "Exactly," I said. "I'm not your anything anymore." The next 3 days were a theater of avoidance. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He didn't beg. He wandered the house like a man walking through a crime scene, unsure of whether he was the victim or the perpetrator. Once I caught him sitting on the edge of our bed, just staring at the floor, not doing anything, just trying to understand how a woman like me, the one he thought he'd domesticated, could now walk into a room like she owned it. But the thing about power? Once you've tasted it, submission becomes impossible. I boxed my life in silence. Lingerie first. Then heels. Then my laptop, my notebooks, my documents. The records of who I was and what I'd built in secret. I left the wedding album on the shelf. I left the photo of us in Italy, the one where I'm smiling like I mean it. I left the couch, the books he never read, the knife set I bought but never used because he always insisted on dull blades. Let him keep the things he thought mattered. I was taking the only thing he ever truly feared losing. My autonomy. He broke on the last night. We stood in the kitchen. The last of my boxes taped lined by the door. The air tasted like metal, something final. He leaned against the fridge like it could hold him up. "You're just going to walk out?" he asked. "After everything?" "Yes." "No talk? No counseling? Nothing?" I turned slowly, met his eyes. "You never wanted counseling when I begged for it. You never wanted to talk when I cried in bed next to you for months. You never even asked me what was wrong. But the moment I start breathing on my own, now you want to fix it?" He clenched his jaw. "You're cheating. I know you are." I didn't flinch. "Not anymore," I said. His face twisted. "So there was someone." "There was me," I said quietly. "And I chose her." I didn't explain more. He didn't deserve it. Let him sit in the house built on control and realize he was never protecting me. He was caging me. And now the door was open. I was walking through it. The next morning I left before sunrise. One suitcase. One carry-on. One clean slate. He didn't come out of the bedroom. Maybe he was awake. Maybe not. Didn't matter. There was nothing left to say. The plane lifted off, and I watched the city shrink until it looked like a lie. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I didn't feel fear. I felt weightless. Like my name had just been returned to me. Denver was brisk. Dry. New. My apartment was small but sunlit. One window faced the mountains. The other faced a brick wall. Both were better than a man who saw my freedom as a threat. I unpacked slowly. Piece by piece. I made tea. I sat cross-legged on the floor in an oversized sweater. I played Nina Simone and opened all the windows. And I didn't look back once. Elias sent a message. Not "I miss you." Not "Are you okay?" Just, "What do you want to do with your life now that it's yours again?" I stared at the screen and smiled. Then typed. "Everything." Caleb never called. Not once. And I realized something beautiful. He didn't want me back. He wanted his control. And without it, there was no reason to fight. Because I was never his love story. I was his mirror. And now that it was gone, he couldn't stand the reflection. Sometimes people ask if I regret it. If the affair was a mistake. If the divorce was selfish. If maybe, just maybe, I should have fought harder. But they weren't there. They didn't live inside that quiet, suffocating marriage. They didn't feel themselves shrink inch by inch to fit inside a version of femininity that made their husband feel bigger. And they don't know what it feels like to be accused before you're guilty, and then become guilty because you finally remembered how to want. So no, I don't regret it. I regret waiting so long to leave. I used to think freedom would feel loud. Like champagne corks and dancing barefoot at midnight. Like a scene from a movie where a woman throws her wedding ring off a balcony and laughs while the wind hits her face. But that's not how it is. Real freedom is silent. It's waking up and realizing you don't have to explain yourself. It's eating dinner at 9 p.m. in nothing but a robe and not worrying if that makes you lazy. It's standing at the window with no need to draw the curtains, because no one's watching. No one owns you. No one gets to. Denver was colder than I expected. But I welcomed it. The crisp air felt like it was scraping off the last layers of a life I no longer claimed. I walked everywhere. Bought myself flowers every Sunday. Wrote long entries in my journal by candlelight. Sometimes with wine, sometimes with tears, but never with regret. I didn't contact Caleb. I didn't check if he was okay. And I didn't care who he told his version of the story to. Let him say I left suddenly. Let him imply betrayal. Let him frame me as the cold one. People will believe what comforts them. But I knew the truth. I didn't leave him. I left the life that made me disappear. My apartment was small, deliberately so. A one-bedroom with a crooked window latch and creaky pipes. But the light was soft and the walls were mine. I hung no photos. No wedding pictures. No reminders. No proofs of a life I had endured. Only art. Color. Texture. Things that didn't explain me. Only reflected me. One night I found myself lying on the floor. Staring at the ceiling, listening to a storm. No TV. No notifications. Just the echo of rain against the window. And I realized something strange. I wasn't lonely. I missed things. I missed touch sometimes. I missed conversation. I missed laughter over inside jokes. But I didn't miss him. And I didn't miss belonging to someone. Because now, I belonged to no one. And that was its own kind of intimacy. Elias didn't push. We messaged. Sometimes long threads, sometimes just a song or a quote or a question like, "What's something you've never told anyone?" I answered all of them, not because I had to, but because I could. He visited once in October. Just for a weekend. We didn't talk about the past. He didn't ask about Caleb. I didn't offer. There was no awkwardness. No expectation. He brought books and bourbon and the softest scarf I've ever worn. We spent the whole first night talking on the couch, our legs barely touching. When he kissed me, it was so slow I almost forgot what rushing felt like. And when we made love, because that's what it was, not fucking, not a transaction, I didn't think once about who I had been. Only about who I was now. Afterward, he whispered into my hair, "You're not angry anymore." I paused. "I'm not. You're something else now." "What?" He smiled against my shoulder. "Untouchable." It wasn't a compliment. It was an observation. And he was right. Not in the way of being cold or distant, but in the way of being untethered. I didn't need someone to fill the space. I didn't want someone to complete me. I had nothing left to prove. Not to men. Not to myself. I was done performing. My body changed too. Not visibly necessarily, but inwardly. Subtly. I walked differently. Ate differently. Slept more. Stretched in the mornings just because I could. I moved like someone no longer flinching in her own skin. And it hit me one morning, brushing my hair in the mirror. This is what healing looks like when no one's watching. Not curated. Not published. Not turned into a story for someone else to admire. Just mine. Raw. Quiet. Real. Caleb sent one final message. 3 months after I left. It said, "You win." I stared at it for a long time. The old me might have replied with kindness. Or closure. Or explanation. But I didn't want to win. This wasn't a contest. It was an escape. So I deleted the message, blocked the number, and felt nothing. Because what he called winning, I called survival. At work I rose fast. Projects came in. My name circulated. I led teams. I solved problems. I walked into rooms with men twice my age and didn't shrink. I didn't soften my voice. I didn't over-explain. And I didn't care if they liked me. 'Cause finally I liked me. That was enough. One night, walking home, I passed a lingerie store. The window was dimly lit. Velvet mannequins. Silks. Satins. Nothing practical. Nothing beige. I stepped inside. Ran my fingers over lace I didn't need anyone to see. I bought a set. Plum-colored. Delicate. Almost translucent. The cashier smiled. "Gift?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "For myself." There's a moment weeks after you stop surviving, when your body finally lets go of its old programming. Not dramatically. It doesn't make an announcement. It's in the little things. You sleep through the night without waking to a phantom weight beside you. You stop racing when someone raises their voice near you. You laugh fully loudly, and realize no one is going to ask you to quiet down. It's not that you forget the past. It's that your body no longer fears it's going to happen again. I was in a yoga class when it happened. Simple stretch, nothing fancy. The instructor said, "Notice where you're holding tension that doesn't belong to you." My shoulders dropped before I even realized I'd been clenching them. And just like that, something peeled off me. Not trauma. Not pain. Permission. Elias and I didn't become a couple. We became something else. He existed in my orbit without trying to colonize it. No jealousy. No possessiveness. No demands. He didn't want to own me. He wanted to witness me. He came to Denver every other month. Stayed a few days. Left no clutter, no assumptions, no shadow over my space. And in that freedom, our intimacy deepened. We didn't fall in love in the traditional sense. We grew into it. Like ivy, quiet, deliberate, unstoppable. Once over wine, he said, "Do you ever think about who you used to be?" I nodded. I don't miss her. But I mourn her sometimes. He tilted his head. Why mourn someone you escaped? Because she didn't know how powerful she could be. He touched my hand gently. She does now. The first time I stood naked in front of a mirror and didn't scan for flaws, I cried. Not because I saw beauty, but because I saw neutrality. I wasn't assessing. I wasn't seeking approval, not even my own. I was just there. A woman. In her skin. Unapologetic. Unavailable for consumption. Present. That night, I wrote one sentence in my journal. I do not belong to hunger. Not his. Not society's. Not my own shames. I do not exist to be desired or forgiven or understood. I exist because I survived myself. Caleb filed for divorce officially 4 months after I left. I received the paperwork on a Friday. No letter. No note. Just papers. I made tea, lit a candle, played Coltrane, and signed my name like it was a closing to a chapter one had already finished rereading. No bitterness. No joy. Just closure. Some people expect vengeance. A storybook ending where I dance on the ashes. But healing is quieter than revenge. It looks like silence. Tastes like peace. A few weeks later I received an email. From his sister of all people. I just want you to know. I see it now. Everything. I'm sorry none of us did earlier. I stared at it for a long time. And for the first time I didn't feel the urge to explain myself. I didn't need to be understood. I already was. By the only person who ever mattered in this story. Me. Some days I still feel echoes. A gesture. A smell. A familiar cadence in someone else's voice. But echoes can't hurt you if you stop answering them. And I don't. I changed my name back. Not legally, not yet. But in the ways that matter. I introduced myself as Rebecca Lynn. The name I was born with. The name I buried when I married a man who wanted me small. Now I wear it like armor. Like silk. Like skin. Because it's mine. And I am finally mine too. People think stories like mine end with redemption. That I found true love. That I married Elias. That I became a motivational speaker or wrote a memoir about healing. They want a message. A bow on top. A reason. But this is not a redemption story. It's not a confession. And it's not a warning. It's just the truth. I live alone now. Still in Denver. Still in the apartment with the creaky pipes and the crooked window. I could move, but I don't. This place knows me now. It's quiet, it breathes with me. I've painted the walls, changed the curtains, built bookshelves from scratch. There's a record player in the corner and a stack of poetry books beside my bed. My life is simple, but it's mine in every inch. No one tells me what time dinner is. No one asks who I'm texting. No one flinches when I put on perfume. Elias still visits. Less often now, but we talk. Sometimes there's sex. Sometimes just silence and shared wine. He never tried to own me, and for that, I loved him in a way I never loved Caleb. I didn't love him to fill a hole. I loved him because he never asked me to shrink. Caleb remarried last month. I know because his sister emailed again. She said, "She reminds me of you. Quiet, pretty, safe." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Let him try again. Let him build a new glass house with someone who hasn't learned how to break it. She'll learn. Or she won't. It's not my business anymore. Sometimes I reread the journal I kept that year. The one filled with names, cities, hotel rooms, hands on my waist, and wine-stained lipstick marks on paper napkins. I used to think those pages were a record of betrayal. Now I know they were the first chapters of returning. Not to rebellion. Not to revenge. But to center. I don't regret a single moment. Not the lingerie. Not the kiss. Not the hotel room. Not even the look on Caleb's face when I said, "I'm leaving." Because that wasn't cruelty. That was truth. A truth he refused to believe until I stopped being afraid of what he might do with it. Some nights I lie in bed with the window open, listening to traffic in the distance. I think about how many women lie awake in houses that feel like cages, holding their breath so they don't upset the man beside them. I think about how many are accused before they're guilty, and how some stay forever trying to prove their innocence. I didn't stay. I became guilty, and I do not regret it. I still wear the plum lingerie I bought alone. Not often. Not for anyone. Sometimes I just put it on, pour myself a drink, and read by candlelight. Not because I want to feel sexy, because I want to feel mine. That's the whole story, really. It was never about sex. Never about men. Never about vengeance. It was about a woman realizing she no longer had to be good or quiet or explainable or soft in the right places. It was about no longer needing permission to exist as herself. So no, I'm not here to ask if I was the asshole. I already know the answer. I wasn't the villain. And I wasn't the victim. I was just done waiting to be given a life. And I took it.